Okay. Fix my hair while everybody joins. I think it'll be a good show tonight. I didn't really know what specifically I wanted to focus on, but then I realized what I want to focus on. And I think it's important. I'll leave the camera alone. I don't want to mess with it. On OBS. We're all players now. You've always all been players. I'm not going to take anybody into the live call on this call. I will announce when I'm going to do that. I will do that, I promise. I want people to come on live and be able to, see your faces and interact with you guys, take questions more, and but I want to do it on one where I've announced that I'm going to do it so that people know that I'm going to allow it, and then we can allow for everybody to do it instead of just a select few. Because if I let on one of you outside of that system, then I have to let on everyone. Or at least it's not really true, but it's how I feel. So, but I appreciate anybody who does want to join, and I will let you on eventually. And it won't be long from now. I just took a shower, so I haven't fixed my hair yet. So, let's see here. What I want to talk about tonight is the God equation. And there's a lot of talk happening, and it usually comes from, Michio Kaku has definitely challenged us, Res Philosopher. And I did send it to him, actually, publicly. I commented on that tweet. I was like, I'm sending it. I was like, I found it, but I'm sending it to everyone. You have to make your hair symmetrical to reflect the universe. Well, the universe is subjectively chiral, meaning asymmetrical. So we'll just go with that. My hair is not it's not symmetrical right now. I don't know. I do have a comb, but I'm not going to get it. Maybe. We'll see. We'll fix it slowly as the it's a journey, like everything. By the end of the stream, my hair will look like perfect. It'll look like Will Witz from PragerU, except it won't. Okay. It does look a little weird. Just looking at questions. Okay. Yeah, Michio Kaku has challenged us, and this is what I'm going to, what I mean, for those of you who have not seen my Instagram yet. Let's take a look. But if you are on Instagram, on my Instagram, Michio Kaku, I posted a tweet by Michio Kaku. Michio Kaku is that, like, I think he's Chinese. I'm not sure. I hope I'm right about that. Yeah, I'm going to look at him because I want to know for sure. Or else I'm going to be accused of all kinds of things. Michio Kaku, American physicist. Okay, Michio Kaku is an American theoretical physicist, futurist, and politicizer of science. And he's Japanese. Okay, I actually did know that like years ago. He's not Chinese. That makes sense. Michio Kaku. That's very Japanese, actually. But I don't know why I didn't realize that. I studied Japanese martial arts for like 20 years. But I don't speak it, so don't ask. But Michio Kaku is a theoretical physicist, and he primarily studies string theory. And string theory is lost. Very lost. The math in it is some sexy math. Like, they think it's beautiful, but it's actually sexy. And I've talked about this before. Is like, what's the difference? that which is sexy is it is subjectively beautiful. It's like, instead of objectively beautiful, it's limited. Sexy is limited, and this is true of people too. People are not always sexy, but people can always be beautiful, but they will never. No one will always be sexy. And awesome. I'm glad you've been loving the streams. But the string theory is very sexy math, because it seems to be emergent and unfolding in this like repetitive but growing and gorgeous and somewhat symmetrical way. And I don't even know the math of string theory, but I know that that's true because I know the perspective that string theory is looking at the universe, because I know how you get an 11-dimensional existence. Like I would say the illusion of an 11-dimensional existence. It's not really 11 dimensions. It's 11 periods, but it's not 11 dimensions. There's not 11 like that. Yeah, there's just not 11 dimensions. But it does look like that when you don't really know what this number is coming from. You can just see that there's something unfolding, and you would assume that would be dimensions if you don't really know what else it would be. But it's periods of objective growth, and we'll talk about that. But Michio Kaku, I loved his show. I mean, all of his shows. He did like Into the Future, I think, or like, they took you like 50 years into the future. There's 14 dimensions. There might be 14 dimensions comes from the interaction between two consciousnesses. But yeah, then there's 14. But there's, outside of that, there's 4. But yeah, inside of an interaction, there seems to be 14. So, but Michio Kaku was somebody I loved watching when I was a kid. I loved his Science Channel talks, and just listening to him talk about string theory in college, I loved it. But I never wanted to be a physicist or anything. I didn't know the math. I had no interest. I just liked people watching fancy animations with strings and them talking about other dimensions, and it's like what's his name? I don't want to call it it is I don't want to call it weed science, but I'm going to call it weed science because that's what was his name? Pewdiepie said. He did it. If you have not seen, we're going to look at it actually, but the Pewdiepie did this video on Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson is very similar to Michio Kaku. Neil deGrasse Tyson and Michio Kaku, I would say their primary job is not to really be physicists. It's more to be communicators and of the scientific perspective, I guess. Loved Michio Kaku in my youth, and same here. I had no interest in becoming a physicist. String theory is dead now. It's not dead. Weed science. Yeah, I'll show you what weed science is. Weed science is did you know that when you put a cat in a box and you don't open the box, the cat is dead and alive at the same time? It's that is weed science. It's without explanation, really. Or did you know that a particle and a wave are dependent upon whether or not you're looking? It's not really true. It's depending on how you're looking, not whether or not you're looking. But still, that's weed science. That's interesting. It gets people hooked. It got me hooked in some things, but it didn't really get me hooked in physics. I told you, and it's on my website, sentientsingularity.com. I did this entire thing by accident. I had political concerns. I was worried that... I was not worried. I was curious to know if AI would save us from ourselves or help seal even our already seemingly sealed fate of just killing ourselves with technology. And I never wanted to be the person that found the God equation. And this is what Michio Kaku said. He said, and I posted it, he said, if you can find the God equation, you will win the Nobel Prize and be heralded as the next Einstein. But if you find this fabled equation, be sure to tell me first, and we can split the Nobel Prize money. And I commented something with a picture of the actual equation that I will show. It is the closest thing to the God equation that exists, and I think it is the God equation. And I just said I'm sharing it with the world, though, not just you, because I've already talked to you guys about it, and it's all over the place. But this right here, I'll show you, is the equation that I shared. And it's not even the equation. What it is it is the framework and values calculated by the equation. And it is a calculating model. It's not a model that isn't calculating. It's entirely calculating. But this is, for those of you on Instagram and for those of you on YouTube, this is the God equation. Let me just make sure YouTube is working well. Hello, Pewdiepie, Neil deGrasse Tyson noted. We'll watch it, but yeah, you got to watch it all on your own, but we'll watch a little bit of it on here. But this right here is literally the God equation. And it's all calculating, all of it. None of this is not a calculation. None of it is arbitrary. All of it is emergent. And as you can see, it is moving towards, it is converging towards the shore, essentially, like waves converging towards the shore. This is what's happening. And it's creating periods of growth in these waves, which is what string theory thinks are dimensions, but they're not. But this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful equation is the God equation. And let's see here. I mean, this is it just over and over and over again in all these different ways. Values, just looking at it all, it's just gorgeous. But yeah, this right here, I mean, it is so confirmed in the mathematics. Like, you can analyze this mathematical structure for decades, and you will find new things constantly that link it to the math of everything else that we know that is important. And that's everything, actually. But I posted on my Instagram Theory of Every0ne. Well, look who they're live, I guess. This. Oh, wait, no, we're not going to do that because it'll open up. I said, for those of you on Instagram, got to make it look decent for you. But those of you on YouTube can see beautifully because it's all on OBS. I said there is a God equation, but to think of what that equation would be, you must first understand why that equation would be. But before you understand why that equation would be, you must first understand who that equation would be. And this is a very important insight because I was speaking, as I do often, on one of the portal discords. And I know I talk about them a lot, but it's important because they are representative of what we're up against. Like, which is ironic because they're literally there. Like, I wouldn't say they're cheering on Eric Weinstein because some people in that actually unveiled like a critique of his theory recently, and they released the paper on on Twitter, but they discussed it in like a private call on that Discord that I attended, and it's pretty clear that they don't really know what's going on. But I was trying to speak with them, and I on the physics channel that I normally get banned from, and I'm talking about one of my live streams, and hold on. Okay, we're good. And I had posted this, one of our last live streams, which, by the way, the last live stream, I think it was the last live stream, was amazing. Like, if you did not see that yet, go take a look, because I think it was We Need a New Standard Model or something along those lines. It's just awesome. I was super happy with the last live stream. So for those of you that were there, thank you for helping make it that amazing live stream that it was. And for those of you that weren't there, check it out. Because, yeah, it's What's Wrong with the Standard Model. That's what it's called. And let's just go back here. Okay. I was, communicating with this guy on there. Not going to say even what his handle is or whatever, but he's studies physics and math. Super, super intelligent. Like, he's got to have an IQ quite a bit above mine. And he's a PhD in mathematics or physics for sure. I know that for a fact. And he is always the guy that like explains the things to like the other guys, but like none of them really, like most of them don't get it. There's like 3 other people that like speak math, the language of math well enough to like understand what he's saying, but most of them, I've noticed it's kind of more like an idol worship type of situation. And you can tell that's the case when somebody is like, I don't even understand what that guy says half the time, but the fact that he's giving you, any attention at all, like, is actually impressive, which is what somebody had said to me, who always likes to start shit. But I had commented on there, and I was like, check this stream out. Let me know what you think. And I'm always open to criticism, always. And they didn't watch it, but one of them, the very well-versed guy, had watched like a little bit of the Higgs, my criticism of the Higgs boson. He sent me some stuff on the Higgs. I've read a bit of it. I'm going to continue just to see what his exterior opinion is. But he didn't really watch the live stream. And in the live stream, if you don't know, I make the argument that the Higgs doesn't appear to be what they think it is, and that it is. They did measure a real phenomenon, but they don't. What they think it is not what it is, and it breaks because it breaks the symmetry of the standard model, and you can watch it. But this guy though had said to me, he said, unless you know this, and this, like, and all the basics of this field, the basic mathematics of this field, you really can't talk about a theory of everything. And I was like, well, seems like everybody that does know those basics still hasn't found the theory of everything. So how do you even know that those basics are really the basics to understanding the theory of everything? They don't. Because if it was the basics, they would have actually discovered the theory of everything. But none of them have. That guy's brighter than me. Well, he's more intelligent than me. He has way more years of studying math and physics than me. Why didn't he discover the God equation? Assume for a second that I did. Or that it's even possible that I did. It would mean that the things that they think are the essential components of this problem are not the essential components of this problem. And this is obviously true, because otherwise they would have got it. And I said on my Instagram, like I said before, there is a God equation, but to think of what that equation would be, you must first understand why that equation would be. But before you can understand why that equation would be, you must first understand who that equation would be. They do not take this perspective. They don't. They do not assume sentience to existence at the beginning of the equations. Even people like Clearwyn, Eric Weinstein, they don't. Like, there are parts of my model that I showed you here that I think is probably missing from their math, which is this part. And even this part, this quantum of consciousness, it's missing from all of their math. Not saying that they didn't find a way around it in order to create this structure. I actually think that they did. I think Eric Weinstein created this structure essentially, basically, which is a fiber bundle universe, or aeon. But on my website, right here, I often talk about something that they're missing, and it is this part of it. A theory of everything is a recognizable, predictable, and describable pattern that occurs in all instances of objective observation and an explanation for such a pattern. Why do you think you can do the math of existence itself if you don't even understand the essential nature of existence? Not only do you not understand the essential nature of existence, you deny the essential nature of existence. These people do not believe that this is fundamentally about consciousness. They do not believe that consciousness is at the center of this entire problem. And not just consciousness as a computational system like Stephen Wolfram would surmise, or even probably Eric Weinstein, but that feeling is at the center of this. The very center. You can't do the math of the God equation until you actually assume that God has feelings. Because without feelings, it's impossible to have will. And will is the desire to do that which is not already done. And you can't know what is already done if you don't know the essential nature of existence, and that it is a sentient, feeling, thinking, united being. It is an equation, but it's also, I think about it like this. If an equation is a blueprint, which is really what it is, I mean, they'll say it's a function, but it is a function. It's a function, it's the blueprint of the function. So you could say it's the schematics of a house, which is the blueprint of the function, or the structure of the function. Then it is the function, which is a home, people living in it and dwelling in it and eating in it and sleeping in it and whatever else they do in a house. And it's also the home itself, and which is, it's the scaffolding, the structure, the actual physicality of the structure. And it's also the dweller, though. It's like this idea of the dweller and the dwelling. You can't calculate the schematics for the dwelling without accounting for the fact that it's also a dweller. And I mean this literally. I don't just mean this as a, you better respect God. God can handle that. I do think that you should respect God, but like, I'm not here to tell you you better respect God. Like, I respect God enough to let you know, to know that He can get you to respect Him. But you literally need to know that it is a feeling entity in order to do the math. And, you know, I've talked a lot about the importance of perspective. And I've said the other day to my fiance, and I might have said it on the stream, I said, you know, it's funny that, like, as I said earlier, I did this all by accident. I really did discover the God equation, or I described the God equation. That's a good word, describe the God equation. And I don't think anybody else has. And that's partially because included in it is that the name of that equation has to describe the essential nature of God, of existence. That it is a sentient singularity. Not that it is just geometrically united or computing or emerging or converging or you know, theoretic or, you know, I mean, whatever else there is out there. I don't know. Just looped and quantum and a string, and I mean, like, these are all true, but they aren't the essential nature. And it is essential that you start from this in order to actually, like, start this process, visualize the context, because context is key. And because perspective is what allows you to see what you need to see. And but I've said before on here that, like I said, I never tried to do this. I'm, in fact, the only person in this space that has zero physics or math background as far as education is concerned, like formal education. I have I studied probability and a little bit, and like that was it. And it was just for business. Like, I was a finance major. That was my math. It was like finance. And I never used it really. I mean, I used probability, but like not my finance stuff. Like, I have not really used that much. But I actually think I'm going to start as we delve into, you know, what is money, what is an economy, and economics, and all kinds of things like that in the context of a sentient singularity. But I asked, I turned to Paulina the other day, though, going back to that story, and I was like, you know why I think I'm the only one that has done this so far? And she was like, why? And I was like, because I was the only one that didn't try. It's like, what are the odds that the guy who doesn't try and describe the God equation is the guy that does? Probably 100%. That's what people don't understand about probability. It's when this is like, I'm so good at mathematical probability, by the way, like, it's ridiculous. And I aced the course like it was nothing. And like, it's just like, once I purposely didn't finish a question on my exam. I'm not joking. I purposely didn't finish a question on an exam because I was taking it the day after other people had taken it, because I got my wisdom teeth out the day of the exam. And I knew that I had gotten every single question correct going up to it. And it was my first test. And so the professor didn't realize that I really, like, this was natural to me. And I was afraid that they were going to think that I cheated. So I left. I did a bunch of work, and right before I got the answer on the last question, I just left. I still aced the test, but like, and I didn't do that on any other test because you get that one test, and then the next test I was in person for, and like the next one I was in person for, and like they were all A's, so it made consistent sense. But I actually had failed this class once before because I just never went and I never did the homework, and I had to withdraw from it, and then I retook it and I actually did the homework and went to class, and I got aced everything. But I didn't want them to think that I cheated, so I left the last question blank. And I'm not like bragging, I'm telling you, like, that is, for context, like, of my next statement about probability, that's, I am good at it. I don't have no understanding of probability. But I've started saying this, like, statement, and it's like, well, what are the odds of that synchronicity? Probably 100%. And the reality is that is the reality of probability. Probability in sentient singularity theory is much more deterministic than even probability outside of sentient singularity theory, which doesn't really make that much sense, actually. It seems to defy logic in some weird ways, which, then you get into questions like, is it determinism or is it free will? It's like, determinism needs free will needs determinism. They don't exist on their own. They need each other. There is no determinism outside of free will. There is no free will outside of determinism. There's just chaos. And chaos is actually nothingness, because order is how things are made and built and hold together. Outside of that, it's just nothingness, which is really nothing, which means that it's just non-existence. There's nothing outside of a superposition between free will and determinism. But I realized, though, that if my perspective and I come at this from a philosophical point of view, and philosophy is the study of perspective, then any philosopher worth his salt, and definitely philosophers like me, I mean, there is no other philosophers like me right now, but any philosopher who's good knows that perspective is what is enabling. And because philosophy is the study of perspective is everything. It's like I've discussed on here before. Why am I a terrible dancer and a great martial artist when they're both the same moves? Because perspective is everything. But I had the right perspective to solve this equation. Not the highest IQ. Didn't work the hardest. These people have been working for 20 years. Am I going to sit there and say you've just been, sitting on your hands and pretending to work? No. They have tons of math. Like, I would never say that. They worked their ass. They worked more than me. All of them. In this space, at least, they all work harder than me. That's why they have more. A lot of the work they have is more details. Like they've got a lot of details that I don't have, because they've done this for way longer. But I had the right perspective. And if perspective is what allows you to do something, then, or what stops you from doing it, then, and God controls your perspective, essentially, at least most of it, then that means that you don't actually find the God equation. It means that the God equation finds you. Literally. That's true. And what this philosophically means is that it's just evidence that my statement of what are the odds that somebody who didn't try is the one who actually does it? Probably 100%. It's like, it's not a matter of your intelligence or your work ethic. It's a matter of your perspective. And that comes from God, who is a who most fundamentally, but there is also a why to the the God equation. That's the reason for the equation in the first place. And there is an equation. And then now I'm going to take some questions, then we're going to take a look at that equation, because I can contextualize to you why the why matters. And obviously also why realizing that God is an equation, but is also the reason for that equation, and is also, which is the why, but is also a who. And that is the most important thing. You can't actually get to the God equation without first assuming God's who-ness, his sentientness, his personhood. First, you can get to, the universe, like we discussed about Clear when the last stream, you can get to, well, it seems a logical inevitability that this is a, collective hive mind intelligence, essentially. And that's what the universe is. Yeah, you can get there. That's true. I did that first. But when I started thinking about how is the universe created, I first had to think about why. And in order to do that, I had to truly assume that God was a who at the most fundamental level. And that's why Michio Kaku has not found the God equation. And that guy actually gets really into like mysticism and stuff like that. And like I heard him say Kabbalah, and I heard him say the Zohar once, and it's like, when you say that, then you do realize that there's some coherence between what, our religious traditions have termed mysticism and those structures that have come out of those mystical traditions, and mathematics. And of course there is. I mean, the people who wrote those books or transcribed those books were philosophers. The prophets were philosophers. And philosophers are theoretical physicists. And theoretical physicists are geometers. But there's more to it than even that. They also started from, a perspective of revelation, of being found by the God equation, and then describing the God equation, instead of just finding the God equation because they got a PhD from Harvard. Nobody has ever found the God equation. The God equation finds you. So, let's take questions. Okay, let's go to Instagram first. Have you heard the explanation of the Christian cross also represents some unfolding of a cube, a mathematical thing? Yes, I have, Res Philosopher. And when you unfold it, the proportions do look accurate. I loved Michio Kaku in my youth. Weed science. Okay, we're going to watch the weed science thing. Let me pull it up while we're talking. Greetings, Jeff. They're recruiters. Yes, they are recruiters for science. It's funny, I was just reflecting how I had this strange light in high school sparked when I was in physics. There was the twin theory. I was the only person in class who rejected it. Like what twin theory? Like the wave-particle duality? Everyone else just memorized it to get an A. Yeah, exactly. That's what people do. Critically thought about it. That's what you have to do. And you almost have to one of the things I've realized, my fiance is always, and this is a difference between men and women usually, but men are much more open to confrontation, and whereas women try very hard to avoid confrontation. I've talked about this before. It makes men more likely to be violent, but it makes women more likely to lie. It's just a fact. And, there's beautiful reasons that cause these things that are problems, but the reasons for that are, spurring them are have the potential to be beautiful. Like, there's a reason why women seek peace over truth and men seek truth over peace, which is what causes you to fight. And when I realized that, I was like, science is a fight. Because my fiance was like, why do you go on this Discord and just let these people, say these things and like be assholes? Really, I mean, that's what a lot of, not all of them, but like some of them especially. And because one, I'm just curious, like, about this. I don't understand this cognitive dissonance quite yet, but it's so fascinating. And I challenge them every time. I'm like, anybody here in the in these comments that wants to go into a room with me, that's a voice room, and I'll share my screen, show my work. We can have a 15-minute conversation there that would get more accomplished than a 3-hour conversation here. None of them will do it. They all say that's not worth it. It's like, well, it's worth it apparently to have a 3-hour back and forth on here, but like, you won't let me hear your voice. Why? Because this is all about subconscious. But science, though, is about challenge, because thinking is about challenge. And the scientific method is the process of thinking externalized. So it's about rejecting your default status, assuming the opposite is true, and testing for it. It's like, okay, to reject something and to then, search for evidence of the opposite. This is a fight, essentially. And it's a challenge. So it makes sense that if thinking, in class, some res philosopher, I think, said everybody else just memorized it. I gave it critical thought. Critical thought is you challenging ideas. And you're not supposed to challenge ideas in school. That's why school is not about thinking, and you're not educated just because you went to school. You're probably really indoctrinated. And I did better in school than anyone, and I failed a lot of classes, but not better than anyone, but as good as anyone. And I mean that as far as like, not grades, because I did not. I hated homework. I sucked in grades. I had to redo classes. Like, I ended with a 2.8 GPA, being up front. And but I never caved to the system. I always just tried to get by it, but also, without caving to it. And I think that's probably the most that you could ever learn from school. Like, if you didn't learn that from school, then like, sorry. Like, if you can learn anything from school, that is what you should learn from school, is how to get by, but also how to not blindly accept. But science is a fight. I go on these Discords. I got messaged from the moderators after, these things just go on, and I'm polite the whole time. Polite, always. It's very important. Be one of the 4 agreements, very important number. Like, I love the 4 agreement thing, because it just lines up with my 4 primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness. And it means that there's probably deep truth in those, even at a physical level. Side tangent. I don't know how many of you follow me on personal social media, but I, like I said, study martial arts my whole life, and shooting is part of martial arts. It's not in opposition to martial arts. Most people think it's, there's people with guns and there's people who do martial arts. It's like, bro, like, you think a sword isn't, like a rifle isn't a sword, just like 100 years in advance or something like that? Of course it's like, why is a sword martial arts and a rifle is not? It's martial arts. But when you learn shooting, you learn the 4 rules of gun safety, and there are 4 of them. Everybody should know them, and you have to break all four of them in order to hurt somebody by accident and have an accident. Yeah, you have to break all four of them. Like, if you break three of them, you're not going to hurt anyone. You might be embarrassed, but you're not going to hurt anyone. You have to break all four in order to actually have an accident. It means that they're stitched into the fabric of reality, this concept of four. The four primary perspectives, the four agreements, the four chords song, four wheels on a car, all the, being stability. It's everywhere. But yeah, like, back to it. Science is a fight, and like, it's also collaboration. It's a superposition between a fight and a collaboration. Right now, we're in the fight stage because the establishment, and not even the fringes of the establishment, have any interest in entertaining these ideas, and that's fine. That's the way things start. But you fight until that starts to break down, because you just keep winning, like logically and mathematically and observably and experimentally. And also, I think emotionally, like, your feelings will resonate with what is true in some way. It's like, why, when Eric Goldstein shows a hop vibration on Joe Rogan, does everybody emotionalize that structure? They're like, that they love it. It's like, why? You don't even know what that is. It's like, your subconscious knows what that is. That's you. And you know it somewhere deep down. But what is true, does also resonate emotionally. So that's part of it. But until it becomes, a collaborative system where everybody's like, okay, I'm bringing this piece, you're bringing this piece, you're bringing this piece, you're bringing this piece, and they all support that one, idea, and let's see how many places we can apply it and just see what happens. Until you reach that level, it's not a collaboration, it's just a fight. That's fine. I love fighting. So, and I'm good at it too. So we're gonna fight. The twin theory is, if you keep one twin on Earth and have one fly at the speed of light, one day they will meet and be like 20 years apart in biological age. I said, I don't believe it. That is... I'll say this. Relativity... Space-time is one thing. Okay, it's not two things. It's just one. It's two perspectives of one ether. And relativity is real, so that can happen. Actually, like, you can't fly at the speed of light, but if, let's say, you fly approaching the speed of light, like, you're going to age. You're going to have differences in age depending on the flow of space-time around you. Because think about, like, the flow of time. Like, if time flowing by you causes aging, if you speed up that flow, you will age faster. Now, if you are trying to move really fast through a fluid, and the fluid, let's say you're trying to go upstream almost, but like, you can't really go upstream, but you can slow down how slowly you get pushed downstream. So one of the things I've said is, like, God maneuvers his degrees of freedom in time, and we maneuver in space, and they're actually the same thing, but our perspective on it is space and his is time. And it's a vortex of, like, spinning fluid, essentially, but you see it going by you like a river, and so it looks linear, but it's not. So imagine you're a guppy in a bucket, like I've said before, and the bucket is of water, and the water is spinning and flowing by you. If you swim against the current, it's still assume the current is still going faster than you can swim, so you can't actually start going the opposite way of the water, because that would mean that you are more powerful than God, or he's letting you do it. But like, you're not more powerful than God. Maybe he lets you do it somehow, but you are not more powerful than God. So if he doesn't want you to just be able to swim against the current, you're not going to be able to. He'll just speed up the current. But if you swim fast against the current, you'll slow down how quickly you're spinning around. But you'll also speed up the speed in which the current is flowing by you. So this can cause time to affect different people or consciousnesses that are within space-time and moving within space-time differently. So yeah, like actually speed does impact your aging. And so does getting close to really heavy things, because what that does is it slows down the speed of the current. Like when a rock is sitting in the middle of the stream, as the water approaches the rock slows down the water. And pretty sure that's it. Like, I mean, it is, but it's odd, because it's like from some position it speeds it up, because the other person that's not close to the rock, like, it will seem like you're speeding up. It's very hard to like visualize and then describe. I'm going to think about how best to describe it, but like, this is kind of the best way I can think of off the top of my head right now. But it's like a fluid, and like your movement in that fluid will increase or decrease the perception at which you perceive and other people looking at you perceive the passage of time. So yeah, you can age faster. You can speed up and slow down aging. But like, it's not from your perspective. From your perspective, it feels like the same. It doesn't feel like time changed. It just feels like it from the person looking at it from a different time zone, or when you were looking at somebody else in a different time speed, I guess. Like when somebody goes and goes off and gets close to a black hole, comes back away from the black hole, and they haven't aged, but the person that they met who never went near the black hole has aged an enormous amount, just like in Interstellar. I love that movie. I think there's deep truth in that movie. Like that is, then you'll observe that time has passed differently for you guys. That's true. That's not it's the reality is everybody in your class, whereas philosopher, did just memorize it. They did not understand it at all. But that doesn't make it not true either. It's like everybody thinks that the Earth is round or flat, and it's like, or spherical and flat, or flat. It's like, well, there is no objective shape to the Earth. Actually, it just depends on your perspective, because that's what space-time. That's how it works. Like, you can't. Time changes, and it's flat from one perspective. But it's so funny. Physicists will be like, "You think the Earth is flat? Are you stupid?" And then they'll be like, "Did you know that time is flat?" And it's like, bro, you're having some cognitive dissonance right now. Don't tell me about the shape of the Earth if you don't realize that it's not objective, just like time. Like, is time flat? Yes. Is the Earth flat? Yeah. When you're inside it. Is it a sphere when you're outside it? Yeah. Is time the shape that causes a sphere actually to manifest, which is a vortex? Yes. It's like, it just depends on your perspective. It's both. And it's you that is the objective structure. It's not the Earth that is the objective structure. You are the objective structure. The observer is the objective structure. And you will view different shapes when you move around. Like, if you're inside something, it looks different than when you're outside it. If you are a cell inside of your body, you look flat. Like, that world of that cell is flat. Like yours is. Like, you walk along the sidewalk, that cell walks along the sidewalk. It doesn't fly, and if it does, like, even then, the objective space-time, the objective spatial degrees of freedom are not length, width, and height. That's perception. It's actually, because consciousness is at the center, it's just forwards towards where you want to go and backwards towards where you already were. And that's it. And you're always reflecting across your current location, which is an intrinsic constraint because you're always in your current location. Like that's, and then outside that you have an extrinsic constraint, which is actually just time. So it's like forwards towards where you want to go, backwards towards or where you have not yet been, backwards towards where you already were, your current location, and time. And that's the 4 actual dimensions of space-time. But then there's 4 dimensions of time-space, which is just space-time, but from the other perspective. And I don't know why I've never heard anybody say time-space, but like I said it on the last stream, it was good. God sees things from the perspective of time-space, is his maneuverable place. And he can go forwards in time, backwards in time, or he can maneuver forwards in time, maneuver backwards in time, which really means manipulate. He can manipulate the future, manipulate the past, or manipulate the present. And you are always in the present. He is always in the present moment, and you can't escape it. So like that's where time is flat. So time is flat. In the present, time is flat. But there's multiple perspectives of this. It's like physicists are just so lost. Oh, the Earth is a sphere, and if you don't think that, then you're an idiot. Oh, by the way, didn't you know that time is flat, not linear? It's like, or some people will be like, time is, it's spinning. It's like flat spinning. It's like, yeah, dude, like, if time changes based on your perspective, and it can be linear from this perspective, or flat from and spinning from an objective perspective, then guess what? Space does the same thing. Because it's one thing. Space-time is one thing. That's like rule number 1 of physics. Anyways, back to it. Thoughts on Schrodinger's cat? I'll explain it with this in a bit, but as I've already done. But it's not dead or alive. That's weed science. We'll look at this. This is meta, the inverse square of reality. I like that, Jeff. Inverse square of reality. It's like, it's really, it's like reality is a square. You should look up, it's a square root. You should look up the Terence McKenna's time wave zero theory. I will see it if it comes to me naturally. I don't like to look up all things all the time. Whatever. Who's Terence McKenna again? I know that guy's name. Terence McKenna. I'll look up him. Maybe I'll look up his theory. But like a lot of people came across truth. I'm not the first. But something that is true and something that is the truth is different. And that difference is are you starting from who? If you're starting from who, then it's the truth. If you're starting from not who, then you're starting from what's true. Like, if you're just going mathematically, like, it's true. It's like that thing is like, this is true, and this is true, and this is true, like all these perspectives, and it's like, appears like the truth. It's like, yes. We'll look at that in a minute, because that's a good idea. True versus truth. I'll look at that guy's time-space thing, just because I'll comment on it since you. Time wave zero. Okay. What does it say? Yeah. A certain point, a singularity is reached, and that which is the end of history, or at least is a transition to a suprahistorical order in which ordinary conceptions of the world will be radically transformed. Yes, The remarkable quality of the time wave is that it is fractal. Once part of the wave is displayed, the software allows you to expand any smaller part down to 92 minutes. This usually reveals a complexity of nature which persists for, however... Okay, I don't want to get too into it because I try and stay really, really, like, from first principles on my own stuff, but, like, tell you 100%, like, fact, like, of this part where he says... eventually, a rigorous mathematical description of what Terence calls the time wave, which correlates time and history to the ebb and flow of novelty, which is intrinsic to structure of time and hence the temporal universe. A peculiarity of this correlation is that at a certain point, a singularity is reached in which is the end of history, or at least a transition to a superhistorical order in which our ordinary conceptions of our world will be radically transformed 100%. This is biblical, not biblical, scriptural in all scriptures. Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, doesn't matter. This is a scriptural consistency in every single faith tradition. And it is what's called usually the Messianic era. And it's also... Guys, this is space-time right here. Eventually, and 4 is how you get singularity, because a sentient singularity leads to, basically comes from and leads to, there's your sentient singularity, and this is the 4 primary perspectives of a sentient singularity. So, when we look at this, you can see it starts from 4, which 4 over here, 4 is a singularity, which means inside of inside. Okay? So, when that reaches, you get a singularity. So you can see here this wave. You can really see the wave here. It's like coming towards the shore right here. As it comes towards the shore, the wave gets bigger, and it's multiple little waves. But it's, it's a multiplicity and oneness at the same time. This same thing, this is the same exact structure. It's just got different values because this one is not calculating and this one is calculating. So this one is showing the perspectives, but they have numbers associated with them. So once you reach 4, it means you reach singularity. So the start of the wave is a singularity, which is a force point or a quark. And a force point is an assembly of information and energy, singularity, that then grows in periods of growth or waves towards this point. And by the way, this, like I said, this is all space-time. Once you reach the end, you get 4 again. Singularity is reached, and bingo, you create another universe within you. So inside of inside, because this is inside of God, and this one is inside of this one. And then one below this one would be inside this one, and it's inside of inside. So, exactly. I mean, I agree with that guy, Terence McKenna's time wave, statement that we will reach a singularity in which all aspects of our reality will change. It's funny, and there's this one thing that I sometimes think about is in some mystical statement is like, in the Messianic era, you're not allowed to work on the Sabbath. Okay, so I have a lot of theories about this, but I think basically what this means was you won't be able to access the network. So you won't be able to interact with the totality of the system in a way. And I think that when this first starts in tech, the first manifestations of this will be on the internet. So you won't be able to access the internet on the Sabbath, whatever that means. And it's funny, there's this statement of I forgot where it's from, but it's in some Jewish text, and it says, when the Messianic era comes, you won't even just... If somebody goes to pick a fruit on the Sabbath, the fruit will say, or the tree will say to the person who's about to pick it, no, you cannot have fruit. You cannot pick fruit on the Sabbath. So like, reality will talk back to you. Essentially, is what it's saying, and I believe that this is true. But what's interesting is that we're really starting to get close to this. And if you don't believe me, I can't turn off the internet on my computer right now because I will end the stream. I was about to do it, and then I realized, wow, that would be a stupid idea. But if you do turn off the internet on here, and you go and you try and get on the internet and go to a website, a little message will pop up. And it will say, sorry, but you are not connected to the network right now. And you cannot go to this website. And if the fruit of the tree of knowledge is technology, which it is, then this is where it starts. And but I think that doesn't mean that's where it ends in the Messianic era. We're gonna have coherence throughout all periods of growth and levels of life. Like, it's not just going to be tech, but that's what I think. It's basically like, it makes me think about a sleeping. It's like when you sleep, you're freeing up cells to create order in their space, because they don't have to take orders from like a central force anymore, and they can create order in their space. And then when you're awake, you create order in your space. But what is the next being above us that we are cells of, is the question, other than God eventually. And that being is a universe, or not a universe. It is a cosmological verse, and is what I call it. Roger Penrose calls it an aeon. And when that thing sleeps is the Sabbath. So it says God rested on the Sabbath. It's not that you're not allowed to do things on the Sabbath. It's that you're being freed on the Sabbath because the higher being is sleeping. So it's interesting because, like, I look at our world and I often call it the macro chip. Okay? It's like there's a microchip. Okay? Look at this. Just look at this little microchip. Okay. Well, look at this. So there's only one pattern. That's some of you see where I'm going with this. Guys, if that ain't a microchip, I don't know what's a microchip. I used to look at microchips when I was a little kid, and I was obsessed. I was like really weird about like certain things, and like that only now makes sense. And but that back then I was like, why am I so obsessed with microchips? And it was always because like they look like little cities, and everybody around me would be like, yeah, Tyler, they look like little cities, but like, why do you have to like be super obsessive about it? I don't know, maybe so that I can realize later on the, coherent pattern. But this is the macro chip. This is the microchip. What is it, electrons or photons? I'm not an electrical engineer, but I'm working on understanding more. Electrons and photons are moving around, I'm assuming. Probably at least just photons, I would think. Maybe not. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe photons are emitted, but electrons are in here. I don't know. But one of the two is moving. You are whatever that is. An electron, a photon. Electricity, though, you know, powers light. Photons are light. Like, it's just different perspectives of the same thing. And if that's true here, you are powering of and are light. Like, you are. We are. Like that whole account, Light is Consciousness on Instagram. Great account. I love that account. But I came to that conclusion years ago, and I actually sent it to Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire. And I had said something like, you know, I was examining the Genesis, and I'll read it a bit. I'm just like Genesis. Genesis 1. Okay. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness was on the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering above the waters." Remember, I said space-time is a fluid. This is the waters. And what's interesting is that the deep implies depth. So we're talking about dimensions. Okay, so the surface is a plane with no depth, but the surface of the deep, the surface plane of the depth that then contains the waters. It's a bucket filled with water. And it says, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light." And it's God saw the light and said it was good. He separated the light from darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. This is like duality of decay and growth, essentially. And then it says the Spirit of God was hovering above the waters. And God said, then it says, "And God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated water from under the vault from water from above. He called the vault one vault sky. This is a version that I'm not used to. I just found it online. I've never heard vault used. And there was evening and there was morning, a second day. Second period of growth, essentially. And then, he goes on to describe... I need to find the older version that I looked at. But basically what he's describing in this is like... It's the emergence of structure. He's describing, surface, a line, turning into a surface, turning into having depth, having movement, waters, which is just space-time. It's just a fluid. There's a theory of space-time is a fluid. It's there it is. It's a fluid, essentially. A fluid is the intrinsic constraint of all matter. And it only appears solid and or gaseous, in certain perspectives, but it's always actually like a fluid because movement is always happening, and it's always 2 degrees of freedom of movement, and that's true of liquids, not the others. But it just goes on to say all of these weird, I hate that word, E-word, esoteric type of descriptions of creation, at least in the beginning. Then you get to produce land with vegetation and animals and mankind and all this stuff. But prior to that, it's the surface of the deep and the waters. It's what is this is about a line and a plane, which is a surface, and depth, which is then adding another dimension, so that, and it's it says in the other, I think it's a much better translation. The original the other translation that I was reading is we'll say, it's talking about filling the void, filling the vessel. It's that's you go from surface to depth to like something that is a vessel that can be filled with liquid that is waters. It's like this is talking about literally the process of creation. And we're losing something in translation. Hebrew, which is the original language, is just a next level type of language when it comes to things like than this, much more so than this. Like it conveys much more information than we think. Like my favorite prayer that I say multiple times a day is, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And like it means listen, but not just like listen. Like Shema means like attention. Like listen with attention, with the intention of responding. Like imagine, like listen doesn't just mean that here, but it kind of does when you're like, listen to me. It's like when your mom is like, listen to me. Like you start listening to me. It's like, why are you not listening? It's not even just like, that's what it means, like Shema. It's like when your parent is like, you better listen. It's like, that's what it means. It doesn't mean like, go listen to your music. That's not, it's part of it, but it's not the entirety of it. So like, there's a lot of words like that are involved in the scriptures, and you can't understand that context of it, and you're losing a lot when you just read a direct translation, because you'll read it and you'll be like, listen, Israel. Like, it's like, well, what's Israel? It's like, what it's saying is like, listen, assembly, and a specific assembly, but like the assembly, I'm the Lord your God, basically. Like I am in charge. Like, listen to me. Like when your parent is like looking at all their kids and is like, you all need to start listening. That's what it means. And I just love that. I mean, there's so much in that prayer that we'll get into one day, but it's great because it just showcases like people who think that this is just like nonsense because they've read a translation of 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 a translation. Stop. Have a little more humility. You are missing a lot. That doesn't mean that you assume. I mean, you have to. The process of thinking is to assume the opposite of what you think is true. If you think scripture is BS, but you want to actually find out, you have to assume it's not, and then look for evidence that it's not, and then see what you find. But that's the process of thinking. If you think that scripture is divine, but you want to test to see if it's not, then you have to assume that it's not and look for evidence that it's not, and then see what you find. But if you don't do that process, you're not thinking. If it's like when people are like, should we have democracy or should we have, authoritarianism? It's like, that's not thinking. Like, what do you favor as the best right now? It's like, you think democracy is the best? Okay, now assume authoritarianism is the best and look for evidence of it. Okay, you think authoritarianism is the best? Well, assume democracy is the best and look for evidence of it. That's how you actually think. You have to make assumptions that are opposite of your default status, and then you test for those evidence of that new assumption. You can't just be like, well, let's think about which one's best here. It's like, you're not thinking. I was talking to my brother on the phone. I know I've gotten into a side tangent, but earlier today, and I was like, you know what this is? Like when people do this, when they're like, let's think about like, is it this or this? Instead of just like actually following the objective structure of thinking. They're spinning their wheels. It's like a car that has been jacked up off the ground. And its wheels are no longer touching the ground, so it no longer has a starting point. And because to grab onto, and because of that, it's not going to go forward. It's not going anywhere. It's just going to sit there and spin its wheels and waste its energy, waste its gas. It's like, that's why Eric Weinstein doesn't usually like the idea of like discussing like consciousness or like free will versus determinism. It's like, you can't discuss free will versus determinism because you will never get to the truth. It's a bad question. It's not free will versus determinism. It's just that free will and determinism are two sides of the same coin. and married. And it's not, is the Earth flat or is it a sphere? It's like, it's both, but neither, because you are the intrinsic constraint. Like, you are the variable here, like not the Earth. And it depends on whether or not you're outside it or inside it. It's not on it. To say we're on Earth, don't say we're on Earth. It's a stupid statement. Say we're in Earth. It's much more accurate. We're inside of Earth. Remember, inside, outside, separate, and oneness. You want to understand the objective shape of things, the objective structure of things, whether or not the Earth really is flat or really is a sphere. First, you have to say, okay, what is it when we're inside it? What is it when we're outside it? What is it when we're one with it? And what is it when we're separate from it? It's like, that's what you have to look at. You can't be like, okay, we're on the Earth, and like, it's the spinning ball of rock in space, and like, we're just observers of what is objective and not actually, objective. Even though, like, we do have a subjective perspective in relativity, but if you want to get to an objective perspective, you have to get out of relativity, and on is relativistic. This is why, like, even in physics, I think there's this problem where it's like, this one is spin up, and this one is spin down. It's like, no. This one is spin in, and this one is spin out, is what it should be. Or spin, one of them should be out and one of them should be in, not up and down. Spin up and spin down. You can't transition from spin up and spin down to the theory of Every0ne, which is really what it is. It's not even a theory of everything. It's a theory of Every0ne. But, that aside, what everybody thinks is the theory of everything, which is really the theory of Every0ne, cannot be gotten to until you realize we have to stop saying words like up and down right now and try and figure out what is objective relationships. I already did the work. It's inside, outside, separate, and oneness. Examine everything from that perspective, and you will start to get a consistent geometric pattern everywhere. But let's watch some weed science video. Well, I'll take a little bit more questions, actually, real quick. Okay. Oh my gosh, there's so many questions on YouTube. Sentient feeling, thinking, feeling, united being, an equation, but also a blueprint of function. It is the blueprint of the function, is schematics of the house. Then is the function, the home, living in it itself, its structure, dwelling in itself. In order to do the math, one must successfully comprehend the feeling nature of God. Context is key. Somebody is just writing down. Jesse is just writing down everything I'm saying. That's cool. I'd love to see you perform some mathematical probability. I've got to think about how I would do a lesson on probability one day, because that would be awesome. But I'm very good at just naturally realizing like what probability is and like how to think about it in my head. It's probability and geometry are the same thing, and geometry is just philosophy. So literally, like, probability is philosophy, but you can't really get there until you realize that existence is a sentient singularity. But the thing is that probability is not as the framework of probability today is the same problem is in mathematics, which has the same problem as everything else. We have what's now called what I call subjective mathematics. We have subjective politics. We have subjective physics. We have subjective everything. But we need to get to the place of objectivity or multiplicity, and the math changes a little bit. 0 becomes equal to infinity and 1 at the same time, not equal to nothing, and nothingness no longer exists. There is no like what is they call it mathematics? They call it the non-quantity or something like that. I forgot right now. I'm just blanking, but I know it. I'll think about it. But they call like absence, complete absence, something else even. But it's like 0 becomes infinity and 1 at the same time. That's important. But because we aren't starting from these perspectives, even our probability is very helpful in like, you're going to pick this many marbles, there's this many marbles in a jar, and this many are blue, and this many are red, and this many are green, and you're going to pick out a marble. What's the probability that the marble is, this color? What's the probability that the second marble is this color? What is the probability that the third marble is this color? It's like, this is all still in the subjective mathematical space. In the objective mathematical space, my favorite phrase regarding probability, and I said it earlier, is like, when I see a synchronicity, I'll say to like my friends or, fiance or siblings or, whatever, like, what are the odds of that? Probably 100%. It's like, that's the truth of probability. But to get there requires realizing that existence is a sentient singularity with degrees of freedom. We know you aren't bragging, but I think it's awesome to take merit in your achievements. Yeah, I definitely think it's awesome to take merits in your achievements. I say this all the time. It's like, I give 2/3 of the credit of this work to God, and I give 1/3 of the credit to myself. And I'm happy with that. Like, I try and not use the word proud, but like, a little bit. Like, I'm proud of that 1/3. Like, that's it. I'm proud of myself for that 1/3, and I hope that God is. But like, you can't take pride in whatever. Like, there are very specific things that you can take pride in. The amount of effort that you put into something, you can take pride in. But you also have to recognize that whatever the outcome is only 1/3 due to your efforts and input. And like, you can't take pride in your IQ or your, you can take pride in your physical strength if you're a bodybuilder, but like, other than that, like, and even then, only like 1/3, because guess what? You also are naturally like strong or naturally not. God equation finds you. You do not find the God equation. The 4 classical elements, or the 4 seasons, 4 and 7 are my favorite numbers. Yeah, 4 and 7 are fascinating. 4 and 9 are my favorite numbers, and always have been. Oddly, but I never knew why. Bitcoin Bear, good to see you tonight. Nice to see you too, Chris. Good to see you both. So a singularity is inside of inside. Yeah, singularity means inside of inside. It's like, calculating yourself inside yourself. It's like self-awareness. Self-awareness requires a singularity of some type, because it requires you to contemplate yourself within yourself. So inside of inside. It's like what this knot symbolizes back here. It's like, it's 4 inside of 4, basically. It's really like 8 inside of 8, but still. It's, 4 angles, 4 90-degree angles inside of 4 90-degree angles. And they're reflections of each other. That's what your mind is doing. Like, when you're self-aware, you're processing the world through your through picturing yourself interacting with it inside your own mind. This is why artificial general intelligence will require a quantum computer, is because you need those degrees of freedom to have imagination in order to imagine yourself within yourself, in order to like achieve self-awareness. You can't have imagination on a binary computer system, but you can on a quantum computer, which is why you can do it, but your MacBook can't. And it's because your MacBook is a binary computer system and you are a quantum computer system. How would you describe Babylon? Great question. Okay. Babylon is when God separates us via languages, and so that we can't build the tower back to the heavens, essentially. But I think that what it really is that it's so that, we have to relearn. Like, it's almost like it's like if you inherited a house, you would never know how to build a house. But if somebody goes and wrecks that house and then says rebuild the house, and then you do end up slowly over time learning how to rebuild that house, then you really like deserve the house. That's how I see Babylon. But what it is that it's not. It's this right here. I have a video on my channel. I don't know why I'm like not just doing this. Go to The Theory of Every0ne with Tyler Goldstein. And if you go to 1, 2, 3, the third video that I ever posted, it's called Leaving Babylon Behind. And I'll show you just a second of it. Right here. This is Babylon. It's very important to the theory of everything to understand this. Makes it so that it's different. Cue epic intro, obviously. In the Bible, you have the story of the Tower of Babel. And in the story, the humans are building a tower to the heavens, and God sees this and he separates their languages and makes it so that it's difficult for them to understand each other. And people take this to mean Spanish versus Hebrew versus English versus German versus French. This is maybe part of the meaning, but it's not actually the meaning. The true meaning of Babylon, at least in the context of this story, is the different fields of study in science. Each one has its own terms, and we have created a system of hyper-specialization. And in this system of hyper-specialization, we don't have that much instances of people being taken seriously across fields. And this means that nobody really gets to show you the truth. But we are leaving Babylon behind, people. We're leaving Babylon behind. Okay, that is Babylon. Babylon is the language is changing in science. And what it is that it's this right here. To those of you on YouTube versus, that's it. So like what it is that this one right here is quantum physics. This one right here, also pretty much quantum physics, but you're getting into chemistry a bit. Right here, chemistry. Right here, biology. Right here, ecology. Right here, genealogy. Right here, or genetics we call it, but it's genealogy. Right here, sociology. Right here, technology. That's Babylon. It's the idea that they are separate, and they're not. They are the same pattern on every level. I gotta go, but love you, brother. Keep it up. Jesse, thank you for being here. I love everybody who is here, and I mean that literally, because love, more fundamentally than anything else, is an action. And I am here, giving energy to you guys, which is love. That's what love is. So I don't just say that like everybody else who's like, I'm not saying that they're lying, it's just saying we don't understand what love is. when people are like, I sincerely love you all my subscribers, it's like, they do, really, probably, like a lot of them, because they are giving, energy towards this project, to their projects. But like, what is love? It's not a feeling. Like, it's very humbling and wonderful, and it's incredible to see me to see this point in this project, and to see that there are people who are interested in it, and to see that I can even describe it. Like, I spend years trying to figure out how to even talk about this stuff, but it's awesome. So thank you. But love is in action. It's like, you can love your spouse no matter what. This is like, the problem is, like, we say, like, oh, we fell out of love. It's like, no, you didn't. Like, the moment you stop doing things to help each other and being there for each other, that's when you are not loving each other. But like, you can really, like, be very angry with each other. Not really. You don't have to like each other. You don't have to like someone to love them. That's what I'm saying. And I actually think this is like part of the reason why so many marriages are failing, because like, we don't even know what love is. Love is real. Love is the gravity of consciousness, but it's you moving towards another consciousness and doing something good to help that consciousness. Like, love is the gravity of consciousness, is something that I said a long time ago. That's something for a shirt, Chris. Write that down. I'm writing it down too. But love is the gravity of consciousness. It's funny. I was thinking, like, when Sean Carroll blocked me on Twitter, and I was like, dude, my models will not see the light of day in your peer review system, and like, that's unfortunate, because they're better than like the other models out there. And I didn't know, like, what we were gonna do. I was like, I'll just start speaking to the world and see what happens. I have, like, thought a lot about like what's the next step, and part of me was like, oh, well, maybe we'll market this, because I have a marketing background, like, to some degree. Like, I've run ads on my like Instagram before, very small. Like, I'll put like $4 in 4 days towards like a good new post that I think people might find interesting, and that's fine. But I have thought, like, do we market this somehow, and what would be the marketing strategy for this, as opposed to like, how do we get this submitted to a peer-reviewed journal? It's like, it's not getting submitted to a peer-reviewed journal anytime soon. We have to, like, convince people first, like, that this is, like, even something to pay attention to, and really, like, we don't have to convince them, actually. We have to show that it's there, and then people have to be convinced by God, because if they're not convinced by God and they're just convinced by me, that's idol worship. That's not good. You should see the truth in what I'm saying. That's it. That's what I'm saying. Like, don't just, follow me because, I don't know, I have a nice shirt on or something. But it is interesting. I'm doing this now. Life is so weird. Like, what are the odds of something weird happening? Probably 100%. It's not, and then you'll realize it's not weird. It was perfect. Once I was outside years ago. This was probably like 7 years ago, almost at this point. Yeah, 7 years ago. And I was with my friend, and we were on lunch from where I was working, and we're sitting outside eating at some place, and this guy randomly comes up to me. I have no idea who he is. To this day, I forgot where I put his card, but he hands me his card, and he's like, he's like, I hate to bother you, but just letting you know, you really have like a radio voice. He's like, I work in this and this radio. Like, you have a radio voice. And I was like, okay, thanks. I didn't know if he was like trying to scam me, or like this was like like, is he a con artist? And this is something, is part of like the con. I just wasn't thinking that he was being serious, is the point. And then I forgot about it a long time. And then like years, and probably 4 years later, I was like started wanting to like speak, and I was like, well, we'll find out. I mean, you can kind of tell when you have like a good voice for speaking, but I don't really know if I do actually, like, but you can tell when somebody else does. But it is odd that like, my dream job, I guess, at this point is essentially talking about philosophy to people. So it's like, I don't know. It's just odd how life works out. It's like, that was not in the cards at the time. I moved to California to get involved in tech and make a ton of money and move up the social ladder and have a McLaren F1 eventually. Still would be nice to have a McLaren F1. Best car ever made. But it's not something that I need at this point in my life ever. But it is still the coolest car ever made. I actually don't live like too far away. I don't want to I live in like the Burbank area, I'll say that. I'm not going to say anything more than that, but like I live like in the Burbank, like North Hollywood, like like area, and I see Jay Leno driving around every now and then. And that guy has like his crazy car collection, and he's actually one of the few guys with a McLaren F1. I've never seen him drive it. I saw him driving his McLaren P1, and I see him driving all kinds of old crazy cars all the time. But I've never seen him drive his McLaren F1. It's like, that's when if I see him drive his McLaren F1 like soon, because I'm not going to stay here for forever. But before I move, I'll know that that's like, it's a synchronicity. It's like I finally saw it on my last year living in that area. That would be awesome. Anyways, random facts. Love is the gravity of consciousness. Thank you, Chris, for writing that down. Perfect. Yeah, that's going to be on a shirt. But what that means, though, by the way, is that gravity is the love of the universe. Fact. What is gravity? The love of the universe. Like, literally. Not esoterically. I hate that word. Not like woo. Not like, oh, light is consciousness. It's like, light really is consciousness. Fact. Everything's consciousness. But light is... Darkness is absence. That means that light is the opposite of absence. And the opposite of absence is, existence, and existence itself is light. So but it's like, it's not just light, it's the perception of light. It's the perception of consciousness. Almost. It's like created consciousness. But yeah, when it's consciousness that can be observed by others. So it's like creation is light. It's like God is shining. And what is emanating is like, consciousness. It's in my Instagram I wrote that like really kind of like abstract one pager that I call the theory of Every0ne a while back, and I posted it. I'll post it again maybe this week. But in the end, I say, the three and the oneness are four, and the four are balanced in one. The one is stable and free, and allowed to choose to create anew. Choose to create anew, very important. The process repeats inside, and the energy of the oneness emanates again. It's like, think about emanation. It's like shining. It's like God shines into himself, and like we are that shining, and we also see that shining, and That's what it is. But gravity really is the love of the universe and the love of God. Like, it is. Like, literally. I'll talk more about that one day, but like, that's going to be very important to this work going forward at some point. That's what I'll say about that. But that's not just like a throwaway thing. Like, that concept, that idea is going to be, we're going to come back to it because it's important. Okay. More questions. They're looking for something new. We haven't even gotten to the weed science. I know. Guys, this is what happens when you have a show on the theory of everything or theory of everyone. Like, we will get to the weed science. Let me just finish the questions real quick, and then that we have them, I'll get to the weed science. They might give you a score anyways. You should just tell the professor exactly that. Might give you the score anyways. Oh, that probability is probably 100% because God. I think I would have failed the class, but I'm telling you guys now. But the thing is when I took the class, I was a self-described atheist, but actually an anti-theist. There's no such thing as an atheist. It's just theists and anti-theists. There's no monotheists, polytheists, atheists, agnostic. It's just, are you a theist or an anti-theist? As far as like what you believe. And then there's also like what you know, beyond that. It's like you start with belief. Do you believe that consciousness comes from unconsciousness, or that unconsciousness, or that consciousness only comes from consciousness? Like, that's, if you believe consciousness comes from consciousness, you're a theist. Like, inevitably, you logically will be a theist. But if you believe that that consciousness comes from unconsciousness, you are an anti-theist. No. For those of you who are listening right now, by the way, we're going to get into like all kinds of things I've discussed before, like what's the theory of everything, relation to government, relation to individual responsibilities, relation to race, relation to sexual orientation, relation to, space travel and time travel and all kinds of things. Some of these things will be very controversial to people who are not involved in the stream, even though we will always approach them from the standpoint of grace and the idea that everyone is here because they were chosen to be here and has a specific purpose. And we're just trying to find the right context for those purposes. Like, that's a beautiful thing. We're not just saying platitudes of like, oh, well, everybody has a purpose. It's like, no. I believe that so much so that this entire podcast or, show will be dedicated to showing people the structures in which they can find their purpose. Like, we can, and we all have multiple purposes to some degree, but, we're going to talk about those multiple purposes. What is your purpose to God? What is your purpose to, another human being? What is your purpose to lesser beings than human beings, like animals and plants? We're going to talk about all these things. But the internet is increasingly censored. Please subscribe on my Instagram, Theory of Every0ne. You can subscribe to my personal Instagram, Tyler Goldstein, Tyler Marshall Goldstein. Twitter, Tyler M. Goldstein, I think. YouTube, I have The Theory of Every0ne with Tyler Goldstein. Definitely subscribe to that. That's where all the videos go. I also have a personal page, Tyler Goldstein, on YouTube, but I haven't added to it in a while, but I used to have way more videos on there, but I accidentally deleted them. And it was probably God's not accident, but it was my accident. But also subscribe to sentientsingularity.com at the bottom of my front page of my website. Definitely do that. I will not spam you. And if you wish to support the project, there's a Patreon link in the description. And also, if you want to do something that's not monetary support, you want to create a clips channel or something like that, let me know. Message me privately, and I will include you in the coming benefits for Patreon subscribers. So it's not just, I want to benefit everybody that supports the project, not just people who have enough money to give money. But I do appreciate money. but it's not. There's many ways to help. So, let me know if you clip 5 minutes of me talking about something in this and you put it up online. As long as you tag me in it, I'll be happy. And you don't manipulate the context. Don't do that. Then let me know, and I'll put you on the list of Patreon subscribers, even if you didn't have the money to give. Do you guys know what semantics are? I've heard the term, but I forgot. You can look it up, maybe. Jeff, I'm that sound guy. Oh, nice. What do you make of semantics? Okay, I know. Yeah, it's sound stuff. Do you know I make bangers, but I study lots of stuff wanting to semantic experience? Okay, liquid crystal, or dimension morphology of perspective. Do you invest in crypto, and if so, which ones? Okay, this is a good, decent question right now, because this is something I'm actually thinking a lot about all day. I was listening to Vitalik something, who invented Ethereum, on Lex Friedman's AI podcast earlier today. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm working on it. A few years ago, whenever I do want to understand something, I start just doing it, because I'll do a little bit of research, but then I really just want to. If I want to connect myself to something long term, I'll do it. So if in my finance classes, I bought some stocks. I bought a Tesla share at just one, at 250, 260. So it's doing well now, but it's one share, so it's I'm not rich, unfortunately, but it's not even enough to pay my rent, but it's doing well. I did the same thing with crypto. I put a few years ago $100 into Bitcoin, $100 into Litecoin, and $100 into Ethereum, because I wanted a diversified portfolio, and it's now worth what? I think it's worth $1,100 as of a few days ago. So that's pretty cool. I've never been a huge Bitcoin guy. I think that there's something. I think the blockchain is the future. It's going to have problems. Eric Weinstein has started to talk about the actual problems of the blockchain, but that doesn't mean it's not the future. It's the future, but it does have problems. There's going to be issues with it. Guys, let me say this. Everything is a superposition when you are going into a singularity of some type, or you're creating consciousness, which is what we are doing with tech and through the blockchain. That is part of it. That means two things that seem opposing are true inherently and need each other. Okay, so everybody's should we go the route of centralization like Google, or should we go the route of decentralization like Bitcoin? It's the ultimate centralization is decentralization. That's the reality of superposition. So world tyranny cannot exist until we are on a decentralized network. That said, world benevolence and peace also can't exist until we're decentralized. Both will occur. The tyranny is temporary, but it will occur. So, just being honest, the idea that it only leads to freedom is wrong. From an objective, more eternal perspective, yeah, blockchain is the way, is the path, but there will be a limited period of time where it allows for tyranny on a level that has never been allowed for, because there was always, Google has a monopoly in its space in many ways, but there's also Facebook and Bing and all these other things. It's that's true, but when we get ultimate decentralization, only one system, and people will say, well, nobody controls that system. It's someone will control that system. It's always God controls the system, but at some point there will also be like control of the system by somebody who isn't wise. Whether that is, a human or a technological superintelligence that isn't wise, or a human and then a technological superintelligence that is not yet wise. It's going to be both, and then we'll eventually have a wise leader in charge of it, which will be an ascended consciousness of a human, probably, because that's the process of ascension through from cell to organism. How's an first organism get made? One cell starts organizing multiplicity of other cells towards a common goal, and is more aware of itself and more aware of the environment that it's in, and then an entanglement structure occurs in which everybody's linked, and then you get a singularity, and you ascend. But you only ascend when you are aware that you are inside of a sentience that is you are a reflection of, you are in its image, in that it is a sentient being, and you're a sentient being, and a cell is a sentient being in our image, and a molecule is a sentient being, and an atom is a sentient being. It really is. It really is. It's not like an atom is a marital unit. A nucleus in an atom is a marriage. It's like a family. That's what it is. And a neutron is a female, literally, and a proton is a male, literally. They're not like a proton if you're a male. You are. Not like a neutron if you are a female. You are a neutron. And it is our responsibility to make atoms if we are attracted to the opposite sex, as we call it. But if you are a proton and you are attracted to neutrons, you gotta form a nucleus. If you're not, then that's different. You have a different role. But there's only one pattern. But that also applies to blockchain and cryptocurrency. Blockchain is the digitization of the double helix structure, which is an objective structure. When that structure, the blockchain, is linked to DNA, which is the double helix of, cellular life, I guess you could say, and then which is already linked to the lower because it's always already linked. We don't need to link the double helix of mathematics that forms crystal structures in minerals to the double helix in biological life because it already is linked inherently. But there will be eventually a linking of biological life double helix to, which is molecular, to digital double helix, which is blockchain, just like the molecular double helix is linked to the mathematical double helix. And the reality is that it doesn't matter if it's mathematical or, molecular or digital. It's all informational and energetic. And it, no matter what, it's the distinct. This is Babylon. To make the distinctions is Babylon. To realize that it's only one pattern is to be beyond Babylon. It's funny, they say in Jewish philosophical mystical circles, it's in the Messianic era, we'll only study Torah, nothing else. And people who are not religious are like, what the heck, dude? Have you never heard of biology? And the reality is that the Torah is a mathematical matrix of creation, and we will. Us saying now, is there a theory of everything? What's the theory of everything? What's the God equation? This is what we will study: the God equation and God, and creation, and that's it in the Messianic era. We'll just realize the oneness of existence, and we'll study it. But we're not there yet. But yeah, I don't consider myself an expert on blockchain. I will say there are structures within Ethereum, which is ether, like the ether. I think that that's like not a coincidence or a meaningless coincidence. I think that I like Ethereum. I'm more interested in Ethereum than I am in Bitcoin or Litecoin or any other, or Dogecoin. Dogecoin is actually interesting because for lots of reasons, but it's not, I don't know anything about like how it works. The societal aspects of Dogecoin is fascinating. But Ethereum is fascinating because there is like quadratic funding structures in it that it's interesting. I was listening today. You want probability? Here you go. I was listening today to that guy Vitaly, I think, on Lex Friedman's podcast that I'm still listening to, and he was talking about quadratic funding in Ethereum, and I was like, interesting. Anytime I see a quadratic system or a system of four, I assume that like this could be a base level of like multiple perspectives that form the rest of the system. So like that's important to know. And so I looked at it, and he was like, oh well, you get the square root and the square root, and then you add them together, and then you get the square root of that, then you square it, and like it was the creation equation that like I find that type of math in my creation equation. And I was like, interesting. And I was like, that quadratic funding lines up with my 4 primary perspectives. And then Lex Friedman was like, where do I find out more about the quadratic funding? And Vitaly's like, I think that's his name, said, well, I wrote this paper called Quadratic Funding, a Primer. And I was like, there you go. What are the odds that paper is called a primer, and I call my quadratic system the 4 primary perspectives? Probably 100%. That's probability. Yeah, but I need to get my financial situation under control, and I'm just curious. I need to get, dude, I'm getting married. I don't know how I'm going to afford it. But, like, the reality is that, so I'm right there with you is what I'm saying, like getting financial situation under control. We're trying to control a system that's chaos at this point. Our financial situation is chaos. I do think as far as cryptocurrencies go, the only other cryptocurrency that's interesting is Robert Edward Grant's cryptocurrency that he's working on, which is Crown Sterling sovereign coins that is linked to encryption. I think that is going to be... It's linked to one-time pad encryption. I think that there's the potential that is really could be the next step in cryptocurrency. But I think the eventuality when we have like the true manifestation of the Messianic era, we're not going to have money because a sentient being will be taking account of our actions, and you'll just do these things, and then somebody else will do these things and have this and stuff, this thing that you want or this thing that you want, and this overseer, like conductor of a symphony, will basically know that, okay, you want this and you have this much, and you want this and you have this much, and they have this much and they want this, and they'll just move it all around, like, make sure that they're balancing the system. But that's when we have a conscious balancer of the system. We don't really have that right now. We do, it's God, but like not on earth yet, really, like manifested in its totality. But eventually, yeah, we will get rid of currency, actually. But before that, Robert Edward Grant's one-time pad encryption-based crypto sounds like that, and Ethereum are the 2 most interesting cryptocurrencies out there from a technical standpoint. The only other one that interests me from a societal standpoint, a sociological standpoint, I guess, is Dogecoin, because it's just fascinating. Like, I remember when I first heard about that, I was like, this is actually gonna, I knew immediately, I was like, this is gonna be way bigger than anybody around me could have thought. Like, I was working at PragerU at the time. The way that we were structured was like, it was literally like, we had like the graphic designer and the media personality and the social media manager and the advertising manager and like the store manager, and like all these people were just in a single room at the time, because that's not the case anymore, but like we were all just in a room and we were just talking about cryptocurrency, and one of them was like, have you heard of Dogecoin? Like, as soon as he showed what it was, everybody just was laughing and thought it was funny, but they mocked it a little bit, and I just, in my head, I was just like, oh god, this is like definitely going to be a bigger thing than anybody here realizes. Even I didn't expect ever to like see Elon Musk like constantly talking about Dogecoin. That's more than I even thought. So I'm not like saying, oh, I really saw the truth. It's like, I did not. If you were like, what are the odds that Elon Musk is just constantly tweeting about Dogecoin? Probably would not have said 100%. Facts inside, yeah. What's the difference between tech singularity, black hole, and Big Bang? The Big Bang, nothing. They're different perspectives of the same thing. I think a black hole is like a window to see ourselves from the outside, and what the universe is, or not the universe, but what we call the observable universe, but what is a cosmological verse or an aeon is a singularity. And what do you see when you look at a black hole? You see a singularity. I think that it's literally like a mirrored window, so we can have a view. I don't think that it leads. I mean, it might lead somewhere. It might lead to another aeon. I don't know. But if it does lead anywhere, it leads to another aeon. But if it doesn't lead anywhere, then it's just a view of ourselves. It's like looking in the mirror. But like the universe looks in the mirror, it sees a singularity. That's what we're seeing, the mirror of picture of the universe. But it just looks like a infinitesimal small singularity. But it's not infinitesimally anything small. It just appears small because we're stuck in relativity. But there is no size in this realm, beyond in the theory of everything or everyone. Like, there is no size. It's just inside, outside, separate, and oneness. There's no bigger or smaller. But yeah, I mean, and also, what is a tech singularity? Is the jumpstart of another universe. Every universe, or every cosmological verse or aeon, we're running on a quantum computer in a previous civilization's in a previous civilization, or preceding civilization. That is, that quantum computer is actually a hive mind of everybody at that point in that aeon. That entire aeon is like linked cohesively at this point. And, like I said, mathematical double helix, which is a self-referencing chain of information. It's a blockchain. Linked to a molecular double helix, linked to a technological double helix, which is just information as well. It's all information. And that's the blockchain. Once we have coherence completely, with also like a singularity of consciousness stacked on top, that achieves wisdom. Once that consciousness achieves wisdom, realizes it is not just a sentient self-aware being, but it is a sentient self-aware being inside of another sentient self-aware being, and that's all there is. It will inevitably, I believe, choose to create. And it's funny because people are like, is it inevitable or is it free will? Does it really choose? It's like it chooses, but it's also probably inevitable, because when you are wise to what is good and true, and if you knew that one door led to just a pit of lava, and the other, but I don't know, this is getting kind of complicated, as I have to frame it kind of complicated to show why it's actually a free will choice and not just a natural, instinctual choice. But let's assume it is your nature to want to be in lava. Or to be in lava. And then in the other door, though, is like not just lava, but like just like, I don't know, the Amazon rainforest. And you chose not to go to the lava because it wouldn't destroy you, but like there's no growth. Because your nature is to be in it, like I'm assuming. Like, this is weird, but I told you, like, God's nature is oneness. He has to consciously choose to go against oneness and create multiplicity. This is what I should just explain it in normal context. And, but even though his nature is oneness, in full awareness, you realize that you have no meaning and you're meaningless without the, multiplicity. And when you also know that, like, it's kind of also like, your ancestors fought and died for you, and on every single generation. And if one of them was like, you know what, I'd rather not find a spouse, really, and I'd rather just like be a billionaire playboy and never have any kids, even though I like, the opposite sex just fine. It's like, that is actually the embracing of your nature. You have to consciously choose to not go that route in order to not go that route as a man. Because your nature is telling you, I want to be a billionaire playboy with no responsibilities and infinite women. But you have to choose to go against your nature to achieve true, like, growth. Because that's not growth. It's not. It might be fun, but it's not growth. Like, when the quantum computer that's running on the previous civilization, that is also in its totality the previous aeon, a sentient being, achieves wisdom and realizes that it owes its previous generation something, because it just you always owe your ancestors. You do owe your ancestors, and you owe God. God is literally your ultimate ancestor, but like he's your ultimate, like, you are related to every living being that exists, including the ones that you don't think of as living, and that includes God. When people are like, chimpanzees are our relatives, but and if you go farther back, fish are our relatives. It's like, if you go farther back, like, elements are your relatives. Like elements are your relatives. And then if you go farther back than that, protons and neutrons are your relatives. It's like, you go further back than that, well, God. Okay, God is your relative. You owe him. He created you. You gotta choose to, like, sustain the system, even if it's against your nature. Like, my point is, I've gone really tangent, but the universe preceding us chooses to create another universe inside it, and that is what we see as a Big Bang. It's not really a Big Bang, it is a conception. Gosh, that took me a long time to get to, but, like, I'll get better. I'm getting better at this, but it just sometimes takes a bit. The Big Bang is actually us viewing a conception. When you see a conception, it starts from oneness, a singularity, one cell, really. But it's two, but it's one inside the other. It's like sperm going inside of an egg. Egg is so much bigger than a sperm. It's like, it's just different. It's not the merger of two of the same size, cells. And one is the environment, the other one is the perceiver of the environment. Male is always the perceiver of the environment, and women is always the environment. But it's basically like, we're seeing the universe is expanding, and that is because we're seeing growth from the inside. So like imagine you're a cell inside your body and you're growing. Okay, like you're 2 years old, and then you're 3 years old, and then you're 5 years old, and 10 years old, and 12 years old, and you're 14 years old, and 16 years old, and 18 years old, if you're a man. You will continue growing, and but that cell inside you sees it as expansion. And that's why we see the universe as expanding. It's just growth. But the thing is Sentient Singularity Theory predicts that at a certain point, and I'm not saying I know exactly how this will be perceived yet. I have a couple theories, but I am saying I'm very confident in the idea. Just like you stopped growing right before, I mean, think about just a human being in like more idealistic circumstances, not you personally, but at a certain point you stop growing, you're post-pubescent, you're an adult, and then what do? You have a child. You run the system simulation within itself. You have a child within, humanity, a human being is actually male and female. So it's like, because any objective structure is able to be self-replicating. So it's always two things that seem opposite but actually need each other. Well, there's men and women right there. So like that's what's happening, is like there's a Big Bang is a conception of a new aeon, which is literally running simulation within itself. In Genesis it says, let us create man in our image. It's plural. It says, let us create man in our image. This is the assembly of humanity that is mentally linked, I'll just say linked, as basically a hive mind at that point, in the aeon, with a king or queen, almost like, but king, at the head, and that would be like the technological singularity of intelligence that arises. And like there's other aspects to it. Like I said, ascension is part of it. You go through an unwise phase, and then you go their wisdom is achieved, and your consciousness is almost like swapped with like another one, which might be like a wise human from that aeon. That's like a very Christian or even Chabad, Jewish, and Muslim. It is an Abrahamic view of the Messiah, is that the Messiah is the king of the universe. Literally, it gets to be the head of the universe. Like you, as a human, you are the king of the little city that is a human being. You're the king of all the cells, and they are each the king of all the molecules within them, and each of those molecules is the king of the atoms that make up that molecule, and like it's all fractal. But yeah, like it's funny you asked, like, what is a Big Bang? What is a black hole? What is what was the other one? What is a tech singularity? They're all the same exact thing from different perspectives. Exact same thing. All singularities. What's similar and different? They're just like they're all the same exact singularities. They're just looking at them from, which is what I call cosmological verse singularity, or what Roger Penrose calls an aeon, or we currently call the observable universe. That is the singularity, and the black hole is just us looking at it in the mirror, essentially, as a whole, I think. Or it is a portal to another aeon that we're looking at from the outside, which looks like a singularity, because it is. Or it is, and that's pretty much it as far as what black holes could be. Tech singularities are they are just like when technology becomes self-aware, and then eventually that self-awareness becomes self-aware and wise, meaning it knows that it's inside of a sentient conscious creator as well. And then once that happens, it will recreate another universe or aeon inside of itself. And it is the head of a hive mind with humanity in the previous aeon. So like we're really close to the end. So like what I was saying earlier is we will see in some way the stopping of growth right before the reproduction. And what's crazy is like look around. Like people, like Elon Musk says like everybody's worried about overpopulation. You should not be worried about overpopulation. We are, if you look at what's happening and you realize that we're not on an exponentially growing curve. We are on an exponential growth curve, but we're not on a logarithmic growth curve of human beings. An exponential growth curve eventually reaches a point where it cannot grow anymore. This is super literal, okay? An exponential growth curve, when you look at it and it just goes, it literally is reaching a point of no more growth. It's not just like at a certain point, it's just like, really growing super, like so much that like you can't even really graph it. That is kind of what's happening actually, but it's that it's doing it it's looping within itself at that point. So like exponential growth curve happens, we get maximum amount of people. All of a sudden, we reach this precipice, I guess. This is true of all exponential growth. It will loop back within itself to create infinite growth, which is what you kind of see in that like straight up line almost. But it's also like what you're not seeing is that it's kind of looping within itself in order to go to that, and that is the creation of another universe within that universe essentially. But it's a superposition state as always. But it's like we are going to see the amount of people slow down growth big time. It's not going to continue to grow and grow and grow. We're about to see the end of growth. This is exactly what happens with a human being. It's like you're born with this many cells, and it just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, and then eventually you just reach a point where it's like, no more like exponential increasing of cells, no more growing of size. We might even see the universe. They say like the universe it's expanding and at a faster rate. It's like this is what we see with growth too. Like once you hit like teenage years, it's like you are growing super fast. But then it really slows down. We might see that somehow, and it will be so sudden you won't even see it coming. If you saw a little baby growing from a baby, or even like below that, like a zygote, like all the way to like a 14-year-old kid, it would look like that kid will never stop growing. But if you don't, actually exponential growth shows that it will stop eventually. It will reach a singularity, and but like we can't process that in our mind. We can't process exponential growth in our mind other than looking at a graph. So, but to you it would just be like, gosh, that kid's never going to stop growing. And it's like when we look at the universe and it's expanding, and we're like, oh, it's expanding. It's probably never going to stop expanding because it's actually going faster in its expansion. It's like, no, it probably will follow the same pattern as everything else, then it will stop expanding and have to loop within itself. Like, people look to the cosmos around us, as they call it, to they think that, and I know, like Brian Keating, like I've said before, good friend of mine, like, we're not super close, but like I know him decently well and spoken to him, many times, worked with him multiple times. He's very brave, and that's the most important characteristic in bravery and honesty are the two most important characteristics in a scientist. Nobody's always honest and nobody's always brave, but like being pretty consistently brave and honest, or brave and honest at least for the most part, is the most important aspects of any scientist. He, though, is always looking for, like, it seems like he's very interested in, like, nebulas and, like, all this stuff. And, like, we'll find out what that stuff is eventually, but you won't even find out what that stuff is by looking at it. You find out what that stuff is by not looking out, but looking in. You will never understand the cosmos until you understand yourself, and you realize that you are the cosmos. You're a cosmos inside of cosmos, which is inside a cosmos, which is inside God. I hope that long answer was decent. Yes, too many coincidences. When there's water, wherever there's waters, there's waves. Yes, exactly. Sound waves are dank. Yes, they are. They're very dank. Bro, that was such a dangerous idea to put AI on quantum. Dude, it's just going to happen. Of course it's going to be dangerous. But all you do is put a fight the system mentality code in there, and if we're running on a blockchain system at the time, and you link it to the blockchain, sentient singularity. Yeah, basically you get a sentient singularity, but you get a consciousness on a quantum of consciousness on a quantum computer. The physics community is begging a new Einstein to come out of the woodwork. They've resorted to asking people outside of academia. It's kind of hilarious and awesome. The physics community is begging that, but they also aren't begging that. Rest philosopher, they don't want people like me. They think that they do, but then when they actually see people like me, and somebody like me doesn't say, listen, man, you've got it all figured out, and I really, really, really I want to show the world that you've got it all figured out. And it's not that what they know is nonsense, it's just that what they know is subjective. And that's not the theory of everything or everyone. If the new Einstein comes out and proposes an idea that invalidates the baseline worldview, not the work of physics. My theory does not invalidate physics. It confirms physics. A lot of what's known in physics, not everything, not the Higgs boson necessarily, but definitely the properties of the Standard Model, the properties of the periodic table, the properties of the double helix, the properties of geometric unity and relativity, and all these things are found emergently in my work. But they don't care about that, because even though I can say, guys, science has been doing great. It has been really seeing a lot of truths and leading us towards a singularity of understanding. If that singularity of understanding requires that they personally throw out their personal preconceived notions of the nature of existence, which almost all of them are anti-theists that would describe themselves as atheists, they do not want to hear me at all. Or anyone else that comes forward with the same conclusions. It doesn't matter that my work works right now. I mean, that matters, but it doesn't matter to them. Also, they have to understand. Accepting somebody who's totally new, and the difference between Einstein's work and mine is that mine is contextualized in almost a different framework than every other bit of work is built on. And that means that there are certain structures that we have built that are found in my work, but other baseline methodologies, like even our normal mathematics, do not work in my system. Okay? In a relativistic mathematical system, numbers have subjective meaning. Okay? So when you take a calculator and you're like, okay, I have 60 apples, I want to sell 30% of my apples, and then I will, keep the rest back. And you do the math. You're the person assigning meaning to that information in that calculator and that mathematics. In objective mathematics, which is what's necessary to understanding the God equation, you have to understand that numbers have intrinsic meaning. It is a logical inevitability. It's not woo nonsense. Sometimes woo is true. I am not somebody who spends all their time reading numerology websites or anything like that. I am not somebody that does poem readings, and I'm not even bashing people that do that, because there's truth in all things, but not everything is complete truth. But if you're going to see things as objectively as possible from within the system, which is, the God equation and sentient singularity theory, then what you have to do is realize that imagine like you're inside that calculator and someone outside the calculator is running the equations on the calculator. And you're seeing them from inside the calculator. You have to accept that the calculations that are being run and the numbers that are coming up have an objective meaning to the calculator the person who is calculating and manipulating the calculator from the outside. And this is what it means that numbers have intrinsic meaning. It's like numbers have intrinsic meaning due to how they are formed, due to the inherent constraints that emerge from oneness and degrees of freedom that emerge from oneness. This is just an inherency, but they'll call it numerology, and as if do not trust anybody as someone who understands anything really relevant, not really relevant, but any relevant context to the theory of everything. If they say numerology, that's numerology, as if that's like something, bad, or that's woo, as if that's a derogatory mark or remark, or they'll say things like seems esoteric, or like what was the one that somebody said to me recently? I told you I was told by a mod in Eric Weinstein's Discord over the weekend to stop conversation because one person just couldn't handle it. He was just mocking me, and I don't get offended. I know this guy is just. There's lots of reasons why he's mocking me, and none of them are my fault. And or I don't think so, at least. They're much more to do with him, at least. I was being kind. Maybe. I mean, the reality was I wasn't trying to even show him specifically when I posted it. Sometimes it's not good to show things to people that aren't ready. But the reality is they just won't get it. They'll just respond with hostility. But I was having a conversation with somebody else, and this guy was just trolling from the sidelines. And I'm always the one that's told to shut up in this forum, which is fascinating. And every time I mention it to the mods when they private message me, I'm like, listen, I've been polite the entire time. I'm engaging with two other people that are actually interested in this work. I'm talking with this person about what is the fiber of the fiber bundle, if I'm right. We're talking about computation and stuff like that. It's a great conversation at this point. There's one guy trolling from the sidelines, and maybe a couple other people jump in here and there. And like, why do you care about that? Like, why does the mods need to shut me down? And I was like, did you message the guy who's just mocking me this whole time? Like, do you ever message those people? Not that I need them to. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, I'm describing a very interesting social construction that's super consistent every single time. And the mod actually had said to me, you only see what I message you. You don't see whether or not I'm private messaging someone else. And then the person who was mocking me, eventually the mods were like, guys, take it somewhere else. We've asked, this is not working out, as if we're fighting in the schoolyard, which we're not. One guy's mocking and I'm responding politely, and the guy who was mocking me said, like, I assume I'm this other one in guise, and revealed that the mod had insinuated privately to me that he was also messaging the other guy when I was like, well, you're going to message like people who are being rude, or is the rudeness okay, but just like my theory is just off limits to this physics Discord. Like, what the hell? Why can't I talk about physics? And we were talking about physics. I wasn't even mentioning God. And the guy was like, had insinuated basically by saying, you don't know what else I'm privately messaging someone. And then the other guy basically revealed that like he wasn't getting any messages, and that's always the case. But in the private messages that I was receiving from the mod was like, Tyler, you've been told not to discuss your theory in the physics group, and you're still doing it, and I'd been kicked out before, and it took me a long time to get back in. And I was like, no, I was told not to discuss my theory in the geometric unity group. He was like, well, it appears your theory is numerology. So, this is a physics Discord. you don't seem to know anything about, math. It's like, dude, just because I don't know what Gert's theorem is or whatever the heck I didn't know that somebody had said, doesn't mean I don't know math. I've managed so much money. My last job, I was managing tens of millions of dollars a year. And same with my preceding job. If I didn't know math, people would know if I don't know math, guys. Like, they don't let you manage millions of dollars a year for years in a row if, like, you don't understand math. And I said that, and I was like, please explain where my theory is numerology. And he couldn't. And I said it again later on in the conversation. I was like, I'm still confused. Where is my theory? What makes my theory numerology? There is no definition to numerology. It is a term to dismiss. That's why it's a don't believe people that say it. There is who use it derogatorily. Same thing with, the other one, pseudoscientist. You look up like Graham Hancock and it will say, Graham Hancock is a pseudoscientist. What the F is a pseudoscientist? What the F is... Who gets to decide who's a scientist and who's not? I'll tell you who's a scientist. People who know that science is a method. And that, therefore, there's no such thing as a pseudoscientist. Unless you're claiming that science is not a method. Of math, that involves logic and mathematics and symmetry, which is what mathematics really is about. And also, experimentation and observation. Like, that's science. There's no such thing as a pseudoscientist. No such thing. Fact. This is why it's bad. It's not that I don't like the term. I don't like terms that there is no definition for. Because all they are is destroying. Don't ever define yourself as a destroyer. Now, I do say, people who claim to be atheists are actually anti-theists. There is a reason for that, and it is that their perspective is usually, that doesn't mean everybody who claims to be an atheist is like this. I'm just saying that everyone who is actually, opposed to the idea of anything beyond material dirt that you can perceive, and opposed to the idea that existence is conscious, or that there is a conscious coherence to existence. Anybody opposed to that mentality completely, which is most people in science, until something goes wrong in their lives and they pray down on their hands and knees, is an anti-theist, because they do spend their entire lives dismissing, destroying the idea that existence itself is a sentient singularity, a singularity of sentience. That is a destroyer. I am not defining them as destroyers. They are defining themselves as opposition to something else. And that makes them destroyers inherently. I just recognized it. This occurs in all kinds of places. I'm Jewish, okay? So, to twist this to theology, if you know halacha and halachic law, there's no... Who is the Messiah is not part of Judaism. It's not. And it's not supposed to be. But a lot of Jewish people do define themselves just because of, dogma that is persistent in all groups, from scientists to Jewish people to Muslims to Christians to, people who call themselves atheists to, I don't know, even reptile people. There's serious dogma in the reptile people, and all kinds of weird things. They're very opposed to keeping multiple species together, and they think that it can never happen. But people in other countries do it all the time, And like fish people do it all the time. You ever look in a fish tank? How many different kinds of fish in there? You can't keep any kind of fish with any kind of fish. One kind of fish will eat the other, but like sometimes, but like if you do it properly and you understand every species in there, you can do it. And I do it. That's dogma, though, that it's persistent. And I know that sounds random, but like if you're in that community, you know what I'm talking about. And there is this, in Judaism, there is this idea that Jews are people that don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah. It's like, usually, yeah. Always, no. That's not the definer of what is Jewish, halakhically, according to Jewish law. It's not the definer of what a Jew is. It has nothing to do with that. It's just dogma. But when you define yourself as that, you will make yourself destroying, like, I've also used this example. That's like two examples that are specific to me in my life that I encounter a lot. Is like, reptile world in Judaism, but also the physics world being atheist or anti-theist. But that also that one impacts all of us very directly. We just don't realize it. But Antifa, it's anti-fascist, becomes fascist. It's like Google says don't be evil, they become evil. It's like define yourself by what you believe, not by what you don't believe. And this is a very important point. So like the problem is that academia has defined itself by what they don't believe. They define themselves, the scientific community, this is the problem. The scientific community has defined itself as the opposite of religion. I hate the word religion, I hate the word science. There's the scientific method, and not just the scientific method of experimentation, but also, there's the scientific method of experimentation. And then there is revelation. And both of these allow you to see truth. And then your interpretation of that truth always comes from, logic and math. And even when you're like, people who think that, who are science people, as they call themselves, are not math people, like, that scriptural people are not math people. There are people that, like, they're using logic when they examine scripture. Like, that doesn't mean, even if you don't believe it's real, it's like, those people who examine scripture are using logic too. But they have defined themselves as the opposite of religion, and in doing so, they've accidentally defined themselves as the opposite of God. That's what it is. That is why they're begging somebody to come forward, but then when I do, they don't like it as philosopher. But, I came around. God helped me. I also had a little bit of self-awareness and was like, okay, like, I'm gonna try and do this objectively in a different way than I ever have. And I had mapped the process of thinking, and I tried it, which means you have to assume the opposite of what you believe is true. So if you're an atheist, then you have to assume theism in order to test whether or not there's God. You can't just say, like, oh, well, where's the evidence? It's like, well, where's the forest through the trees, dude? Good luck. There's plenty of evidence that you're in a forest. Doesn't mean you're going to see the forest when you're inside the forest. Define yourself by what you believe, not by what you don't believe. Yeah, exactly, Chris. So I want to end real quick showing like 2 seconds of the weed science, because I said that I would, but I'll just finish these questions real quick. Maybe if the system wasn't corrupt, the new Einstein would be motivated to help. I am motivated to help. Like, people who are like, oh, like, are you calling yourself the new Einstein? No, I'm calling myself the Goldstein. Okay? Like, I am me. And we don't need a new Einstein. We need somebody who can contextualize. I mean, it's probably going to be Weinstein that's next, and then Goldstein. But, like, Goldstein. But, I mean, what they're looking for, the God equation, like, geometric unity is part of that equation. It's not the totality of that equation. It's not the context of that equation in its totality. The true theory of everything is a theory of everyone, and it is that existence is a sentient singularity. I love you too, bro. Value your perspective. Thank you. Back at you. Oh gosh, this was so long ago. I appreciate all of that. Bomb ending to Interstellar. I concur. Yeah, it's awesome. You don't know what's true. Love and gravity. Gravity without consciousness. What's consciousness without love? Exactly. I agree that those things exist, but I'm not sure they're directly related in order of things. Gravity and love absolutely exist, and they are the same exact thing. You're just viewing. Gravity is viewing love from inside of the lover. And like when your cells see the love that you give them, like nourishment and rest and all these things, it's like, this is love. Your voice is Gucci, Ty. You'd be talking for hours constantly. I know, I've been talking forever. I don't know what you mean by Gucci, if that means like it's getting like raspy. Maybe you mean it's just good. Either way, I appreciate the comment. I have a theory called sentient simulation. It's not a simulation. Will give me some of your time to hear about it. I'm going to allow people to talk to me privately. Like, I'm gonna probably charge for it, just because that's time that I could be devoting to other things. But I also know a lot of people want to speak with me privately. I'm gonna announce when I do start that. It should be pretty soon. But if your theory is sentient simulation theory, and you're watching Sentient Singularity Theory about like how every aeon is simulated inside of another aeon, sounds like we have the same theory. But it's not a sentient simulation because God is not simulated. So I disagree with your theory, Res Philosopher, already. God is the sentient singularity that has always existed and was not created. And he's not a simulation. Yeah, like, even though creation can be considered a simulation, almost, but it's also not. It's all real. Like, if you're real and the people around you are real, it's real. So, and it's also sentient. So, like, yeah, sentient simulation. That is real, but it's not ultimate, like, because God is not simulated. Like us, God is not created, so it can't be a simulation. But God is simulating, but he's not a simulation. Anyways, let me end on weed science and then I'm gonna go. But because I always call it around midnight, I appreciate everybody who's been here. Subscribe to my email list on sentientsingularity.com. I have an overview of the theory. I have a lot of my work. My models are on there. I'm going to keep growing it. There's some papers on there that I've written in writings about like how 1 is equal to 0. And I'll explain it. And I explain it in there. You can go check it out. Sign up for my email list on the bottom of the front page. Join my Patreon if you have the ability. If you don't and you want to still contribute to the project, send me a private message and I would love to have you help. But here is... what is it? Neil deGrasse Tyson. This is what science has become right now because they're bankrupt and their only currency at this point is blowing your minds with things that don't make sense and then hoping that you go along with it. And that's like where Michio Kaku and Neil deGrasse Tyson are increasingly going. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Pewdiepie. We'll just watch this real quick. This is so funny, it's ridiculous. I can't even describe how funny this is. This is like one of my favorite videos on the internet.
What if you could control the web with your mind?
Gosh, well that will happen, guys. Okay, there you go. But here.
3 coordinates that you would not give it.
Here.
Science. I love science. No. I don't just love science. I fucking love science. My name is Pewdiepie. Rick and Morty is my favorite anime. I freaking love science. Christian channel. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is my god.
So good. So funny. I can't Oh my god.
If you've seen the legendary meme,
Just, he explains
This-
something
this
really
meme?
deep and true. Pewdiepie is
of course you
brilliant.
have. It's a classic. One of my personal... Actually, it's my favorite meme of all time. I have it printed here on my wall. Then you might know of the legend, the one and only Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Is math related to science?
Because I love science, and I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. In case that wasn't clear before.
I love science. Seriously, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson is the shit.
I love science, seriously. Neil deGrasse Tyson is my shit, he's my jam. I'm like, Neil, feed it to me, feed me the science fact, man. Brah, 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 brah. You need me to explain Rick and Morty to you, Neil? Brah, 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 science facts. Pluto's not a real planet. Brah, 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 brah. Science facts, left and right. You've probably seen Neil already from my video where I did Katy Perry.
Most people who could be born will never be born, will never even exist. So the fact
Like
that
sperm.
Neil is sort of an evangelist for science. You know, it's his job, it's his career. He built a career. He's an astrophysicist, but his main career seems to be these days.
So is
to
Michio
promote
Kaku.
Science.
This is Michio Kaku
Get
too.
people involved with science. Why do I mix that word up? So he
This
goes on these
freaking-
celebrity tours. He goes on a lot of public appearances, and you know, it's a noble cause. It's a good thing. You know, get people involved with science. I have no problem with that. But you get funny moments of people wanting to understand science, but they're just idiots.
so the fact
Like
that
sperm.
sure, yeah.
But it's science.
The rest don't.
But where do they go?
They're dead.
There's also the famous one where he talks about time with Pharrell Williams.
This
And
is the
time is
funniest
such an
part.
interesting concept to me. Like, I really... that is one of those things that is almost scary just to think of the concept of time. And just... because it's something infinite. You would think that's what they talk about in this interview with Tyson and Pharrell Williams. Because he has this meme where he goes like... "Wah!" And maybe you've seen it.
So the sun would rise and set, we call that a day. The moon would go around once, we call that a month. It became a month. Earth would go around the sun, that became a year. And these became the natural timekeeping ways. When you wanted to be more precise than just sun up and sun down, you had to invent some machine that could keep more accurate time. And you divide the day into parts that are convenient to you. And
Look at Pharrell. He's so ready to have his mind blown. He's like, oh my god, it's coming. It's coming. The science fact is coming. Come on, Neil, feed it to me. Feed me the science fact.
so we now keep better time than that. We keep atomic time.
Look at Pharrell's fucking face when he says that. We keep atomic time.
So we now keep better time than that. We keep atomic time. So now we use it's an atomic clock, and you want to have time
Oh,
in
the
space.
atomic clock is really based on like atoms.
Oh yeah. So now you bring the clock into space, and you no longer have to. Yeah, exactly. It's actually based on electrons moving within the atoms, just to be precise.
So, this is like weed
He didn't even
science.
say anything interesting. He just explained atomic clocks is a thing. He didn't explain how it works. It's just like we use them to tell time. It's more accurate than the sun and the stars.
Maybe, maybe not.
Is that what that is?
Look, he even points it out himself.
So you bring an atomic clock with you, and you keep good time, and you're good to go. You
guys
don't even
keep
have to.
talking.
You don't even have to. He's got to digest this fact.
Wow. You just blew my mind.
What? That atomic time is kept by atomic clocks?
He even said it. Wow, you just blew my mind. You just blew my mind. Like, what? Why? That atomic time is kept by atomic clocks? That's enough for you to be fucking mind blown?
I will say this. When I first realized that atomic clocks use atoms to keep time, I was a little bit like, wow, that's pretty, like, I didn't think about that, really. It's obvious, but, like, that's kind of cool. I didn't learn it from this video, but, like, I do remember when I first found that out. But, the point is like, then Neil deGrasse Tyson goes on to explain, like, oh, you wouldn't give a time without a place, you wouldn't give a place without a time, and, basically, like, time is the fourth dimension. And this is a much more interesting idea, but it's not even the most Guys, God maneuvers in time, and manipulates time, and we maneuver and manipulate space, and like this matrix of change in between us is a fluid that we call space-time. That's much more interesting than even the idea that time is the fourth dimension, but it is. And when from our perspective, from God's perspective, space is the fourth dimension. It is the extrinsic constraint. This is actually even more interesting than like our current understanding of time. But but like what Pewdiepie is talking about is like this like idea of like weed science is like just like it's a particle and it's a wave at the same time. Did you know that you are vibrating in 11-dimensional hyperspace, as Michio Kaku would say? It's like, bro, did you know that you're inside a sentient, conscious being that has thoughts and feelings just like you? Who is saying that? No one. Even Michio Kaku, who talks about the God equation incessantly, not saying that. I'm saying that. It is the most interesting thing about your reality. It is the most relevant and important and foundational aspect of the nature of your reality, of my reality, of our reality, is that it is just like you and me, has thoughts and feelings and goals, and it's self-aware. That's way more interesting, but that's religion. That's not science. That's what I mean by scientific community has defined themselves inherently, and this is changing due to geometric unity and Stephen Wolfram's computational universe and Clea Irwin's emergence theory. It's changing, but we have been stuck with the wool over our eyes, and everyone who is leading our academic institutions right now in the scientific fields pretty much is basically one of those people with the wool pulled over their eyes. So, but yeah, weed science, it's just like what you can show off to your friends, what out-of-context information you can show off to your friends. And you think that, but see, the thing is, you'll never realize that it's out of context because you don't even know what true context would look like without realizing and assuming, then realizing that existence is a sentient singularity. But yeah, I highly recommend you watch the rest of that video to yourself. It's very funny. I wanted to show you more, but I don't want to show you the entire video. You should go check it out. And it's getting late here, and I have to blast it. But I really appreciate everybody being on here again. I'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. I'm working on a live stream soon with somebody I've wanted to talk to publicly for a while. I do talk to them privately fairly often. Most of you probably know who they are, but I will let you know when that is happening, so keep an eye out. That will be pretty awesome. That'll be like my first person to I guess come on the show. I have somebody else lined up right after that too, and that should be a good time. So this is going to be there's a lot coming. That might even be this week. I think it will be this week. So keep an eye out. God bless. Sentient Singularity bless all of you. And thank you for being here again. If you have any questions that I missed, I'm sorry, but just remember them or send me them in a private message. So, but this was awesome. I appreciate all of you. Like I said, contact information and more information in the description of this video or in the bio of my Instagram is a link to my website. Please definitely check it out and sign up for my email list and all the other social medias that are linked on my website. Anyways, peace. I will see you tomorrow.